The moment my grandfather's will was read, everyone in that room believed they were watching my life collapse. What they didn't understand was that they were actually revealing everything he had already seen coming. I remember how still the air felt when the lawyer said my name. It was the kind of silence that hums beneath the surface, heavy with expectation. Everyone was leaning forward, waiting for a number that would confirm what they already believed about me. For Hazel Carter, $50. For a split second, my mind rejected it. It tried to fix it, to stretch it into something that made sense. 50,000, maybe even 500, but the pause that followed made it clear, it was just 50. A crisp bill slid across the polished table toward me, the faint sound echoing louder than it should have. Across from me, my brother Ethan let out a laugh that didn't bother pretending to be polite. "Wow," he said, shaking his head. My father leaned back slightly, his lips curling into that quiet, controlled smile I had seen my entire life. The kind of smile that didn't celebrate loudly because it didn't need to. It was the expression of a man who felt proven right. My mother didn't look at me at all, and I just sat there, still, not shattered, not embarrassed in the way they expected, just still, because something about this didn't feel like an ending, it felt like a message. My name is Hazel Carter, and in my family, I was never the one people expected much from. Not because I failed, not because I ever gave them a reason to doubt me, but because I was quiet, while Ethan learned how to take up space, how to dominate conversations, how to turn every moment into an opportunity to be noticed. I learned something else entirely. I learned how to observe, how to listen, how to notice the details other people missed because they were too busy trying to be heard. My parents called me easy, sweet, low maintenance. Words that sounded kind but carried something hollow underneath. What they really meant was that I didn't disrupt the version of reality they preferred. I didn't challenge them. I didn't complicate things. I didn't matter enough to require attention, except to one person, my grandfather, William Carter. To the world, he was a billionaire who built an empire out of nothing. A man who didn't raise his voice, but still commanded every room he entered. But to me, he was just Grandpa Will. He drank his coffee black, preferred silence over small talk, and believed that if you paid attention long enough, people would tell you exactly who they were without saying a word. When his health started to fail, the rest of my family suddenly remembered he existed, but only in ways that were convenient. My father would visit in expensive suits, checking his watch halfway through conversations. My mother brought flowers that stayed untouched in a vase. Ethan came once, stood near the doorway, and said something vague about staying strong before leaving within minutes. I stayed, not because I thought it would earn me anything, because leaving felt wrong, because someone had to sit in that quiet room and make sure he wasn't alone when the machines were louder than his voice. I adjusted his pillows when his breathing became shallow. I read the newspaper out loud when his eyesight failed him. I listened to the same stories again and again, even when I knew every word, because I understood something they didn't. It wasn't about the stories. It was about being there. One afternoon, sunlight filtered weakly through the hospital blinds, cutting thin lines across his bed. He reached for my hand, his grip fragile but intentional. "Do you hear that?" he asked. "Hear what?" I leaned closer. The quiet. I smiled softly. "Yes. Most people are afraid of it," he said. "I'm afraid of a lot of things," I admitted. He turned his head slowly and looked at me in a way that felt deeper than anything anyone had ever said to me. "You're not afraid of silence, Hazel," he said. "You're afraid of being invisible." The word settled into me like something permanent. Another night, when the machines hummed steadily and the world felt far away, he said something else. "Money doesn't show who people are," he murmured. "It removes the mask faster." I let out a small laugh. "You sound like you're planning something." His eyes flickered, just for a moment. "Maybe I am." I thought it was the medication. I didn't know he had already decided everything. When he passed, it was quiet. No dramatic final speech, no long goodbye, just a soft release of breath and then nothing. I stood there for a long time, holding his hand even after it had gone still, thinking the same thing over and over again. The only person who ever truly saw me is gone. The funeral was exactly what you would expect for someone like him. Controlled, elegant, expensive in ways that didn't need to be announced. People filled the chapel, dressed in black, speaking in low voices that carried just enough emotion to sound appropriate. But beneath the surface, there was something else. Curiosity. I heard it in the whispers. "How much do you think he left?" The real estate alone must be insane. Ethan is probably set for life. My family moved through the room like actors in a perfectly rehearsed play. My father shook hands with quiet authority. My mother dabbed her eyes at carefully chosen moments. Ethan accepted condolences like they belonged to him. Anna stood near the back. Alone, no one asked if I was okay. No one needed to. In this family, that question was never asked unless there was something to gain from the answer. After the service, people left quickly. Conversations shifted from memories to logistics with unsettling ease. Money has a way of doing that. A few days later, the letter arrived. The will reading. I told myself not to expect anything, but hope doesn't ask for permission. The law office felt colder than it should have. Everything was polished, symmetrical, precise, like the room itself had decided who mattered and who didn't. My father took the seat at the head of the table. My mother sat beside him. Ethan leaned back, already relaxed, already confident. I chose a seat at the far end. The lawyer began reading. $5 million to my father, $3 million to my mother, $2 million to Ethan, then me, $50. The reaction was immediate. Laughter, whispers, confirmation. I didn't react. Instead, I looked at the bills in my hands. And then I saw it. A mark. Tiny, precise, intentional. My grandfather's voice echoed in my mind. If you want to hide the truth, put it where no one bothers to look. That was the moment everything changed. I left the office quietly. The laughter followed me into the hallway. But it sounded distant now, like it belonged to another version of reality. I sat in my car, staring at the bills. 2 markings, numbers underlined, a pattern. This wasn't nothing. This was a message. I drove to the bank without fully deciding to. Muscle memory, instinct, something deeper pulling me forward. The building felt familiar, like stepping into a place that had always been waiting for me. The lobby was quiet, controlled, the kind of place where voices stayed low and secrets stayed buried. I need to speak with the branch manager, I said. Minutes later, I was sitting across from a man named Mr. Thompson. I placed the bills in front of him. These were left to me, I said. At first, he looked mildly curious. Then he looked closer, and everything about him changed. His posture straightened, his expression sharpened. He stood up, walked to the door, and locked it. Where did you get these? He asked carefully. You already know, I replied. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. These markings are part of a verification system, he said. My pulse quickened. He explained that my grandfather had set up something separate from the will. Something private, something that required proof only one person would recognize. These bills, he said, are the key. I followed him into the vault. The air grew colder with every step. The silence felt heavier, like it was holding something important in place. He unlocked a deposit box and slid it open. Inside was everything. Gold bars reflecting the light, documents tied to companies I recognized, accounts, investments, more wealth than I had ever imagined, approximately $32 million. He said calmly, but I barely heard him, because on top of everything was an envelope. My name written in my grandfather's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. If you are reading this, it means you saw what others did not. Tears blurred my vision. I gave you $50 not because that is what you deserve, but because I needed you to see the truth. Money does not change people, it reveals them. I wanted you to watch who laughed, who stayed silent, who showed you exactly who they are when they thought you had nothing. You were the only one who stayed when there was nothing to gain. That is why I trust you. The money is not a reward, it is a responsibility. And then the final line, do not make yourself small again. I sat there in silence, the weight of his words settling into something steady and uncheckable. 3 days later, they came. My father, my mother, Ethan. They didn't call. They knocked like the door owed them something. I opened it. We need to talk, my father said. They walked in without waiting. Ethan leaned against the counter watching me. We heard something interesting, he said. I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence stretch. What did you hear? I asked calmly. That there's more, he said. There it was. No pretending. No masks. My mother stepped forward, her voice softer now. Hazel, we're family. If there's something, we should handle it together. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I saw the difference between what she said and what she meant. You already got your inheritance, I said. My father's expression hardened. Everything your grandfather had belongs to this family. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. He made sure it didn't. Ethan stepped closer. You really think you deserve all of that? I met his eyes. I think he trusted me with it. The room went silent, and in that silence, everything became clear. Not just who they were, but who I had been. Someone who made herself smaller so others could feel bigger. That version of me ended in that moment. I need you to leave, I said. They argued. My father tried logic. My mother tried emotion. Ethan tried pressure. None of it worked. Eventually, they left. And the silence that followed felt different. Not empty, not heavy, peaceful. In the months that followed, everything changed. Not all at once, but steadily. I worked with Mr. Thompson to secure the assets, trusts, accounts, structures that protected what my grandfather had built and what he had chosen to place in my hands. I learned things I had never been taught, things my father had always assumed I would never need to know. Finance, strategy, ownership, control. At first, it felt overwhelming, like being dropped into a world that had always existed just beyond my reach. But slowly, something shifted. The same skills that had made me invisible in my family, my ability to observe, to listen, to notice patterns, became my greatest advantage. I stopped second-guessing myself. I stopped waiting for approval. I stopped shrinking. Months passed and with them came distance. My family tried to reconnect in the beginning, calls filled with forced warmth. Messages that sounded more like negotiations than conversations. Invitations to dinners that felt like staged performances. I declined, not out of anger, but out of clarity, because I finally understood something I had spent my entire life trying to ignore. Love that only appears when there is something to gain is not love. It is strategy. Eventually, the calls stopped. The silence returned, but this time, it felt different. It felt like peace. A year later, I visited my grandfather's old house. It had been maintained exactly the way he left it. The same chair by the window, the same desk with his notes. The same quiet that once felt heavy and now felt comforting. I sat in his chair and let the silence settle around me. For the first time, it didn't feel like I was alone. It felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. I thought about everything that had happened. The will reading, the laughter, the whispers. The moment they all believed my story had ended, and I realized something. That moment was never my ending. It was my beginning, because the greatest thing my grandfather gave me was not money. It was the ability to see clearly, to understand people without needing them to explain themselves, to recognize the difference between being quiet and being invisible, and to finally, fully, take up space in a life that was mine. They thought $50 was all I was worth, but the truth is, it was the key to everything.